Thomas Miller had never been the sort of man to believe in fate. He believed in strategy. He believed in systems. From his vantage, luck was not the driving force in success, only diligence and astute decision-making. These principles had guided him for 2 decades, culminating in the creation of a thriving data consulting enterprise named Miller Analytics. He had started the business in a cramped spare room, building small contracts into bigger ones, eventually employing a team of 50 skilled professionals. Their office, situated in a modern mid-rise downtown, provided data-driven solutions to a spectrum of corporate clients. That success had bestowed upon Thomas a certain prestige, but it never made him arrogant. If anything, he took pride in maintaining an unassuming demeanor, an analytical mind behind calm eyes. Yet, for the past year, something had gnawed at him, a quietly growing sense of unease. His marriage to Melanie, once filled with shared dreams and unwavering intimacy, seemed off. He couldn't pinpoint when exactly this shift had started. Perhaps it was a few months after their son Jason had left for college. The atmosphere around the house changed. Melanie grew more distant. She withdrew from long-standing routines and seemed guarded when he asked how her day had gone. Occasionally, he'd catch her on the phone, lowering her voice as he entered her room. Thomas tried to ignore the creeping alarm in his mind. He told himself that marriages evolve and that perhaps Melanie was simply seeking novelty in her own life. Still, doubt lingered. Observing subtle changes was, after all, part of his profession. Late one Wednesday afternoon, Thomas left a board meeting early and drove home. The skies over the suburbs shone a crisp blue, the air warm against the hush of neatly manicured lawns. He parked his black SUV in the driveway, then opened the front door, calling out, "Melanie, I'm home." In the past, she might have rushed over, greeting him with a warm hug. But that day, there was only silence. He found her in the kitchen, phone clutched in her hand. The quick way she tucked the phone behind her back when he entered spoke volumes. "Thomas," she said, a too cheerful lilt to her voice. "I didn't realize you'd be home this soon." Her auburn hair was pinned up in a low chignon, and she wore a fitted blouse and jeans. Casual, yet meticulously put together. Something in her hazel eyes flickered with guilt. Thomas couldn't ignore that feeling in his gut. He let his briefcase settle on the countertop. "Slow day at the office," he replied, trying for nonchalance. "You look startled." She forced a quick laugh. "I was just chatting with someone from the gym." "Everything all right?" he asked, noticing how her posture stiffened, shoulders tense. "Of course. Why wouldn't it be?" In that small exchange, their life together seemed to form a hairline crack. He nodded politely, decided not to pry further, and stepped aside to let her continue. Yet inside, the seeds of concern sprouted. If there was one thing Thomas had learned in business, it was that small changes in data trends can be harbingers of bigger problems. The next morning, Thomas was stuck in traffic downtown when his phone buzzed. The screen displayed Patrick Hayes, a name that carried weight in the corporate world. Patrick was the charismatic CEO of a giant corporation called Global Strategy, Inc., which had become Miller Analytics' biggest client over the previous 2 years. Their partnership had propelled Thomas's company from local recognition to a larger regional presence. He tapped the speakerphone button. "Patrick, good morning." "Thomas!" Patrick's voice boomed with affability. "How's my favorite consultant doing?" Thomas scanned the line of cars crawling forward. "Busy, as usual? Something on your mind?" "Yes, actually," Patrick replied, tone shifting to something more serious. "I'd like to meet and finalize the next phase of our contract. We've got a tight board schedule next week. Are you free tomorrow?" Thomas mentally checked his schedule. "I can make that work. Noon? Perfect. Let's do the Riverfront Grill. I'll reserve our usual table." Once the call ended, Thomas drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. Patrick Hayes was known for his persuasive skill and his commanding leadership style. Having him as a client was a boon, though sometimes it felt as though Thomas had sold a portion of his independence in the process. By the time Thomas finally reached Miller Analytics, the morning was half gone. His assistant, Janet, hurried over. She was a dedicated woman in her mid-30s, always juggling calls and scheduling with seamless efficiency. "Thomas, you've got a conference call with the Blue Star Group in 15 minutes. They're eager to discuss the new proposal." He nodded. "I'll be there. Anything else urgent?" Janet glanced at her tablet. "Your son called. He wants you to call him back." Thomas felt a little jolt of concern. Jason was away at college, and while they spoke regularly, he rarely called during morning hours. "Thanks, Janet. I'll give him a ring first." He settled into his office, a corner room with wall-to-wall windows that overlooked the bustling city. It was a space that exuded competence and success, everything carefully arranged. He dialed Jason's number. "Dad," came Jason's voice, bright despite the early hour. "Hey, kiddo, what's up?" "I'm working on a summer project, something that'd be perfect as an internship at your firm," Jason explained. "I figured I'd ask if I could join for a few weeks. Learn the ropes?" Thomas smiled, relief washing over him. "Absolutely. You know you'll have to earn your keep, though. Nothing's free." Jason's laugh on the other end was comforting. "Wouldn't expect otherwise. Great, let's talk details tonight." "Sure thing." With that, the conversation ended, leaving Thomas buoyed by the thought of his son's future. Yet the tension at home lingered in the back of his mind, overshadowing the excitement. That afternoon, Thomas wrapped up the meeting with Blue Star Group, then stepped out to see a familiar figure stepping out of the elevator. Patrick Hayes. Tall, well-groomed, wearing a tailored Navy suit and a self-assured grin, Patrick cut the image of a polished executive who never took a false step. "Thomas," Patrick called, striding confidently forward. "I was in the building meeting another contact. Couldn't resist saying a quick hello." Thomas smiled back. "Always a pleasure. Shall we talk in my office?" They walked together, exchanging pleasantries about the city's economic climate. Once inside Thomas's office, Patrick took a seat in one of the leather chairs, crossing one leg over the other. "I'm excited about our lunch tomorrow," Patrick said, flicking imaginary dust off his jacket. "But I wanted to give you a heads up. I have bigger plans for Miller Analytics, possibly something that involves a deeper partnership." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Bigger partnership? You mean integrating more closely with global strategy?" A mild smile curved Patrick's lips. "Yes, maybe something that includes an official seat on our board for you, a merger of sorts." Thomas felt his pulse quicken. "That's a major step." "That's what I do. Big steps," Patrick replied. "Anyway, let's discuss over lunch. Bring any concerns you might have." Thomas nodded, watching Patrick stand and button his suit jacket. As Patrick left, a swirl of thoughts consumed Thomas. A board seat at Global Strategy would be huge. It might catapult his firm's profile. Yet he also felt a flicker of caution, as though stepping into deeper waters with a shark. He pushed the uneasy feeling aside and sent a quick text to Melanie. "Patrick has some big ideas for the company. We'll talk at home?" He waited, but no response came. When he finally arrived home that evening, the house smelled of stir-fried vegetables. Melanie was in the kitchen, wearing an apron over her casual clothes. Everything looked normal, and yet there was a tightness around her eyes, a forced brightness to her smile. During dinner, Thomas tentatively brought up the conversation about Patrick's offer. "He's talking about a serious merger, maybe giving me a seat on the global strategy board." Melanie's response was lukewarm. "That's good, right?" She poked at her food. "As long as it's on your terms." Thomas examined her expression. "What do you think?" She shrugged noncommittally. "I just worry about losing control of your own firm. Maybe you could consider transferring some shares?" The question came out too casually, making it all the more suspicious. He set his fork down. "Transferring shares? To whom?" She hesitated, then offered a brittle smile. "I don't know. Maybe me, or someone who can oversee things if something happens to you." A chill slid down Thomas's spine. "Why are you suddenly concerned about something happening to me?" She looked away, fiddling with a napkin. "No reason, just accidents happen." The words clanged ominously in the air. Thomas felt an odd compulsion to challenge her, to demand she tell him exactly what was going on, but he reined himself in, uncertain if he was ready to hear the answer. Instead, he finished his meal in silence, nodding on autopilot when Melanie mumbled something about going to bed early. The following day, Jason arrived home from college for a short break, duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He was 19, tall, bright-eyed, with the sandy brown hair he'd inherited from Thomas, and the hazel eyes from Melanie. "Hey, Dad," he called the moment he stepped in. Thomas smiled warmly, meeting him in the foyer. "Son, good to see you." They shared a quick hug. "How's school?" "Busy," Jason said, setting his bag down. "But I'm excited about this possible internship." Melanie wandered in from the living room. "Jason, hi," she greeted, hugging him. Though her voice sounded pleased, Thomas noticed a slight stiffness in her posture. The rest of the evening revolved around small talk, Jason's classes, dorm life, and the upcoming summer. Thomas tried to steer the conversation away from the firm, uncertain how Melanie might react or what secrets she might reveal. Jason, however, sensed the tension. Later that night, after Melanie had gone to bed, father and son stayed up, watching a late show on the couch in low volume. Jason pressed pause on the TV remote. "Dad, is something off with Mom? She's hardly said a word to me." Thomas sighed, raking a hand through his hair. "It's complicated. She's been acting strange for months, asking about my shares in the company, pushing me to consider what happens if I'm incapacitated." Jason frowned. "That's weird. Do you think she's worried about your health?" Thomas let out a slow exhale. "I'm not sure. I have this terrible suspicion that there might be something else going on, like she's hiding something." He paused, eyes clouded with sadness. "I also have this dreadful thought that she might be having an affair." Jason stared at him, momentarily stunned. "What? With who?" Thomas grimaced. "I don't know, but her phone calls, her texts, how she's always stepping out of the room, it all lines up. I can't prove it, but my gut says something is up." Jason, normally easygoing, looked tense. "Dad, maybe we can find proof. If she's betraying you, we need to know." Thomas nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the entire situation intensify. "I'm going to keep my eyes open, but let's not jump to conclusions yet." They unmuted the TV, though neither really watched. Their minds were elsewhere, on secrets that threatened to rend their family apart. On Monday, Thomas left for a routine medical checkup at the local hospital. Driving his SUV along a busy stretch of highway, he heard an odd rattling sound coming from the engine. Frowning, he turned off the radio and listened closely. A metallic clunk, dull yet repetitive as though something were loose. Concerned, he slowed to exit the highway, planning to pull into a service station. But the noise escalated into a loud pop. Instantly, the steering wheel jerked and the SUV veered, tires squealing. He fought to regain control, but the vehicle smashed into a guardrail with a sickening thud. His ears rang as the airbags deployed, slamming into him with a force that drove the breath from his lungs. The pain radiating from his ribcage suggested something was broken. For a few moments, he drifted in a haze of shock, tasting blood in his mouth, a dull roar echoing in his head. Ambulances and flashing lights came next, paramedics extricating him with swift, methodical movements. As they strapped him to a gurney, Thomas's mind reeled. Why did his engine give out like that? Cars do break down, but bolts don't typically come loose without cause. A new, chilling possibility emerged. Was this sabotage? He tried to speak, to ask questions, but darkness claimed him as the ambulance sped away, sirens wailing. Thomas woke under fluorescent hospital lights. An IV line snaked into his arm. His ribs throbbed, each shallow breath a reminder of the crash. A doctor stood nearby, scanning the chart. "You have 2 fractured ribs, some cuts, and a mild concussion," the doctor explained gently. "We'll need to keep you for observation." Through the dim haze of pain medication, Thomas forced a nod. The crash replayed in his head. He could still feel that jolt, that metallic pop. Something definitely felt orchestrated. In the early afternoon, Melanie arrived. She looked distraught, eyes red as though she'd been crying. Yet Thomas couldn't help noticing a certain tension in her stance. "Oh, Thomas," she breathed, hovering near his bed. "Are you okay?" "I'll live," he replied, wincing from his rib pain. She sank into the chair, tears brimming. "I was so worried." He studied her face, recalling her recent talk about him being incapacitated. The notion that she might be behind the crash struck him as both horrifying and surreal. Could she be that cold? He prayed he was wrong. Minutes later, Patrick Hayes strolled in, wearing his trademark polished look, carrying a glossy bag of supposed get-well items. Thomas felt an immediate surge of anger. Why was Patrick here? But he forced a polite nod. "Thomas," Patrick said softly, "this is terrible. I heard about your accident, drove over as soon as I could." Thomas's eyes flicked to Melanie, who gripped his hand. She tried a weak smile. "Patrick wanted to check on you," she said. "He's concerned about the firm, but more importantly, about your health." "Right," Thomas managed. The conversation that followed was stilted, heavy with hidden tension. Patrick made a few remarks about, "When you're better, we'll continue our talks," then left. Melanie lingered. When they were alone, she broached a subject that made Thomas's heart pound. "Thomas, if your recovery takes weeks or months, do you want me to manage the company in the meantime? Perhaps a temporary power of attorney? Just until you're back on your feet." His mind blazed with alarm. "A power of attorney?" he repeated. She shrugged, a sweet smile plastered on her face. "It's just an idea, so the deals in progress won't fall through. I can sign documents on your behalf. There's a lot at stake." Thomas, despite his injuries, recognized the shift. "Let's hold off," he said gently. "I'm not ready to hand over control yet." A flicker of annoyance crossed her features. Barely perceptible, but enough for him to notice. She nodded stiffly, stood, and excused herself. Once alone, Thomas closed his eyes, mind roiling with suspicion and heartbreak. Was the accident part of a plan to force him into signing? He could hardly bear the thought. Late that night, the hospital corridor was quiet. Thomas dozed fitfully, drifting in and out of medication-induced drowsiness. He awoke to a soft click at the door. Expecting a nurse, he instead glimpsed a dark figure slipping into the room, a hooded man. Thomas's heart thundered. Through bleary eyes, he saw the man approach the IV stand. A glint of metal suggested a syringe. Panic seized Thomas. He tried to call for help, but his voice emerged as a croak. Just then, the door burst open again. Jason stood there, phone flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Hey, what are you? Get away from him!" the intruder snarled, dropping the syringe and lunging at Jason, knocking the phone from his hand. In the scuffle, the man twisted free and bolted for the door. Jason shouted, "Security!" But by the time staff arrived, the hallway was empty. The would-be assassin had fled. Jason rushed to Thomas's side, trembling with adrenaline. "Dad, are you okay?" Thomas fought to steady his breathing. He tried to inject something, I'm sure of it." Hospital security came in, flipping on the lights, scanning the floor. A shaken nurse picked up the discarded syringe with gloved hands. The label was scratched off, though it would soon be tested in the lab. As Thomas lay there, the full horror crystallized. Someone wanted to finish the job they'd started on the road. The police arrived shortly thereafter, taking statements. Thomas recounted the bizarre confrontation, while Jason described how he arrived just in time to see the intruder tampering with the IV. Security cameras had caught only a shadowy form near the elevator. The man's face remained obscured by a hood. Thomas refused to stay in the hospital any longer, fearful that a second attempt might succeed. The attending physician argued against discharge, but Thomas insisted on leaving under his own responsibility. Jason helped him secure a nearby short-term rental apartment, close enough for medical follow-ups without the vulnerability of the hospital environment. Once he was settled into that small studio apartment, father and son had a difficult conversation in hushed tones. Thomas lay on the narrow bed, adjusting the pillows to ease pressure on his ribs. Jason sat in a battered armchair, worry etched into his face. "It has to be Mom," Jason said, voice tight. "Or Patrick. Or both. No one else would benefit from hurting you. Mom's been asking about power of attorney, and you told me about the weird engine failure." Thomas's expression was haunted. "I hate to think your mother could do such a thing, but the evidence is pointing that way." Jason rubbed his temples, clearly distressed. "I found some suspicious phone bills in the kitchen drawer. I recognized Patrick Hayes' number. Mom has been calling him a lot more than you'd expect for a mere acquaintance. Multiple calls every day." Thomas's jaw tightened. "She's having an affair with him," he said in a near whisper, a bitter edge to his voice. "And they want me out of the picture, so Patrick can take control of Miller Analytics, or so they can sign it over." Jason set his hand on his father's shoulder. "We have to do something. Should we go to the police with this hunch?" Thomas exhaled. "We need harder proof. Right now it's all circumstantial. Unusual phone calls, a suspicious accident, a masked intruder. If we accuse them, they might slip away or deny everything, or Patrick could use his corporate power to crush us in court." Jason nodded. "Okay, so we gather real evidence. We set them up?" Thomas's eyes narrowed. "Yes, we'll record them or catch them admitting it, something that stands up in court." Outside, the city lights glowed. Thomas felt a surge of sadness at the betrayal, but also a sharp resolve. He would not let them steal his company or his life. 2 days later, Thomas received an email from Patrick. Subject: partnership discussion. "Thomas, I'd like to move forward with our talks regarding a strategic partnership and potential board seat. Let's finalize terms soon. Perhaps come to my penthouse this Thursday evening, more private, no distractions. Best, Patrick Hayes." Thomas stared at the message on his laptop, feeling both rage and grim determination. This was it. The perfect opportunity to gather incriminating evidence. He quickly replied, "Patrick, that sounds reasonable. Let's meet Thursday, 7 p.m. I'm still recovering from the accident, but I'll manage." Thomas. He leaned back in his chair. Thursday was 3 days away. That gave him enough time to acquire a covert audio recorder. He needed to provoke Patrick into a clear admission of guilt. The biggest unknown was whether Melanie would be present as well. Just then, his phone lit up. Melanie calling. Thomas let it ring twice before answering. "Yes?" "Thomas," Melanie said softly. "How are you feeling? I was worried when you left the hospital so soon." Thomas forced composure. "I'm doing as well as can be expected. Are you at home?" She paused. "Yes. You never came back." He sensed the guilt and anger in her voice, though she tried to mask it with concern. "I needed peace and quiet," he said. "Look, I know you want me to sign some papers for the firm, but I'm still not sure." Her tone chilled slightly. "Thomas, you're injured, and we can't afford to have deals fall through. I'm just trying to help." He swallowed. "I'll think about it. For now, I have a meeting with Patrick on Thursday. Maybe after that, we'll see." A heartbeat of silence. "Patrick told me," she finally said, voice guarded. "Be careful, Thomas. You never know what might happen." With that, she hung up, leaving Thomas in a swirl of dread. Had she just threatened him? He couldn't be entirely sure, but a chill prickled across his skin. Wednesday night arrived with a thunderstorm rumbling through the city. Lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating the small studio apartment where Thomas was holed up. Jason had returned from a quick run to the electronics store with a discreet, voice-activated recorder. They tested it on the kitchen table, speaking in hushed tones to confirm the device picked up every word. The clarity was decent, and it automatically switched to standby whenever the room was silent. "This should work," Jason said, eyes flicking to the doorway as if expecting an intruder. "When you talk to Patrick, get him comfortable. Let him brag or reveal the sabotage. Once you have enough, we can involve the police." Thomas nodded, tension mounting. "I'll hide it in my jacket pocket." He carefully flipped it off, preserving battery until the crucial moment. "If something goes wrong, I'll text you or call. You'll have the police on standby." Jason licked his lips nervously. "Right. They'll be ready, but we need probable cause. A confession on tape is about as strong as it gets." Thomas put a hand on Jason's shoulder. "Thank you. I never wanted you involved in something like this, but I have no choice." Jason managed a grim half-smile. "We're in this together, Dad." That night, Thomas slept fitfully. The thunder and lightning an unsettling backdrop to the fear that Thursday's meeting might be his last. Yet a kernel of determination burned within him. He'd built Miller Analytics through grit and intelligence. He would not let a traitorous wife and a power-hungry CEO destroy it all. Thursday, 7 p.m. Thomas stepped into the private elevator that led to Patrick Hayes' penthouse. Each upward motion of the elevator felt like ascending toward the unknown. He wore a dark blazer draped loosely to accommodate the bandages around his ribs, and inside the left breast pocket lay the tiny recorder, switched on. The elevator door slid open into a foyer of polished marble floors and minimalist decor. Through expansive windows, the city glittered below, the lights casting reflections on the pristine surfaces. Patrick awaited him in the living area, a gleaming, modern space with austere black leather furniture. "Thomas," Patrick said, flashing a charismatic smile. "Glad you could make it. How's the recovery?" Thomas forced a polite nod. "Better, bit by bit." Patrick gestured for him to sit. A single folder rested on the sleek coffee table, presumably containing contracts. Thomas's gaze flicked to it. The sense of danger was palpable. They exchanged pleasantries about the new potential deals, the expansion of global strategy, and the synergy with Miller Analytics. All the while, Thomas steered the conversation closer to personal stakes. At one point, he said softly, "My accident put things into perspective. I realized how vulnerable I am." Patrick's gaze narrowed. "Yes, that was unfortunate, but I'm sure everything will be fine now." Thomas studied him. "It made me wonder if there were forces at play, someone trying to nudge me into signing over control of my firm." "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Patrick chuckled, lifting a crystal glass of whiskey to his lips. "Thomas, you're paranoid. No one wants you dead. They might want your shares, your position. But that's just business. People do ruthless things." Thomas felt adrenaline spike. He forced a wry grin. "So you admit that someone could orchestrate an accident?" Patrick shrugged. "If they wanted something badly enough, sure. But you don't have to worry about that if we align our interests. Let's talk about partnership. You sign these documents granting me controlling interest, and I'll make you a permanent board member at Global Strategy, plus a very generous severance if you choose to step back." Thomas feigned curiosity. Controlling interest? That's a big ask. Patrick leaned forward, his expression turning sharper. Let's not dance around. Melanie is on board with this. She wants to see you step aside. She's grown tired of you holding all the cards. Hasn't she mentioned anything about it? Thomas's gut twisted at the confirmation that Melanie was deeply involved. She's mentioned a few things, but I'm still not clear. Why the push now? Patrick smirked, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Because we can, and because the window for certain deals is closing. We want to incorporate your firm under our umbrella while your brand is hot. That and your recent misfortunes. Thomas let the words hang, pressing him further. Misfortunes you might have orchestrated? A flicker of arrogance lit Patrick's eyes. Maybe not. Thomas, let's be honest. There's no proof that I tampered with your SUV or arranged a hospital job. And if there were, it would be your word against mine. Unless, of course, you want to risk your entire company in court. Thomas's breath hitched, though he tried to maintain composure. The mention of a hospital job was the very admission he needed. He made a show of looking pained. Let's say I sign. Will everything stop? Patrick offered a slow, predatory grin. Yes, sign, transfer your controlling shares, and you can keep on living your life. No more accidents, no more fear. You have my word. Thomas nodded, deliberately picking up the contract. He pretended to skim. I see. Let me think about it, he said, mind whirling with fury at how callously Patrick treated another man's life. Patrick gave him a moment, then slyly commented, Melanie told me you'd be resistant, but you're tired, Thomas. You want an end to this stress. Do the right thing. Sign the papers, let me take the reins, and you'll walk away with your health. And your son, still alive. The mention of Jason nearly made Thomas snap. He pressed a trembling hand to his ribcage, letting his anger simmer behind a calm mask. The recorder was capturing every word. This was more than enough for the police. Downstairs on the street, Jason waited in his sedan, phone in hand, scanning the building for any sign of trouble. The plan was straightforward. Once Thomas texted him the signal, done, Jason would call the police, specifically Detective Bernal, who had agreed to intervene if they had solid evidence. Minutes ticked by. Jason's nerves frayed with each passing second. Finally, his phone vibrated. A single text from his father. Thomas. Done. He confessed. Send them. Jason exhaled in relief, adrenaline surging. He immediately dialed Detective Bernal. Detective, we have it. Patrick Hayes just confessed to orchestrating the accident. My dad has it on tape. He's in the penthouse now. Bernal's voice was firm. All right. We're moving in. We'll meet building security. Head up with a warrant. Stay put in case we need more info. Jason ended the call, heart hammering. He could only pray his father would stay safe until the police arrived. Upstairs, Thomas sat facing Patrick, who returned from refilling his whiskey. The tension in the air crackled like static. Thomas used the lull to stealthily pull out his phone again, tapping a second text to Jason. Police coming? He barely had time to slip his phone away before Patrick noticed. The CEO's eyes narrowed. Who are you texting? Thomas met his gaze calmly. My son. He's checking on me. Patrick gave a short nod, suspicion flickering. You'll sign tonight, right? Thomas offered a faint smile. If it means my life is no longer in danger, yes. The corners of Patrick's mouth quirked up in a satisfied expression. Smart man. Just then, the penthouse intercom buzzed. Patrick frowned, heading to the wall panel. Yes, he said into the speaker. A muffled voice replied. Building security here, Mr. Hayes. The police are requesting entry to your residence. They have a warrant. Thomas saw the color drain from Patrick's face. He turned slowly, eyes flashing with realization. You set me up. He advanced toward Thomas, fists clenched. Thomas stood, ignoring the pain in his ribs, adrenaline overriding caution. You did this to yourself, Patrick. You confessed on tape. Patrick's fury nearly burst as he grabbed the contract off the table, as though it might help him. That was entrapment, he spat. Thomas gave him a cold look. No, it was you bragging about your crimes. Before Patrick could respond, the elevator chimed. Voices echoed in the foyer. Police! Mr. Hayes, we have a warrant to search the premises. Detective Bernal and two uniformed officers strode into the living area. Bernal, a man in his 40s with a no-nonsense air, flashed his badge. Patrick Hayes, we have evidence linking you to conspiracy to commit murder and corporate fraud. Please step away from Mr. Miller. Patrick glared at Thomas, then at Bernal. This is ridiculous. I want my lawyer. Bernal nodded to the officers, who swiftly moved in, securing Patrick's arms behind his back. "You'll have the right to an attorney, Mr. Hayes, but for now, you're under arrest." Thomas let out a long breath, relief flooding him, mingled with exhaustion. As Patrick was read his Miranda rights, he kept his eyes on Thomas, seething. "You won't get away with this," he hissed. "My lawyers will bury you in court." Thomas watched silently, aware that the recorded confession and the chain of attempted murder were overwhelming evidence. No matter how wealthy or well-connected Patrick was, it would be a monumental struggle for him to dodge these charges. Meanwhile, down in the lobby, Jason waited anxiously until he saw Patrick being escorted out in handcuffs. Bernal gave a signal for Jason to come forward. He hurried up to his father, who was leaning against a wall, one hand pressed protectively to his injured side. "You okay, Dad?" Jason asked softly. Thomas nodded, though he looked pale and shaken. "I think so. Let's get out of here." As they walked to the street, Bernal assured Thomas they would gather every shred of evidence needed to prosecute Patrick. "Keep your phone on," Bernal said. "We'll probably need a formal statement soon. Also, if you have the original audio device, make sure it's preserved." Thomas promised to cooperate fully. He and Jason slipped away from the scene, overshadowed by swirling media vans that had begun arriving, drawn by the sirens and rumors of a high-profile arrest. A storm of revelations was about to break in the corporate world. But for Thomas, one crucial piece remained: Melanie. Thomas felt simultaneously vindicated and hollow. He returned to the short-term rental with Jason, collapsing onto the sofa. The adrenaline of the confrontation drained away, replaced by the dull ache of physical injuries and emotional wounds. Jason, pacing the small living room, finally spoke. "Dad, we have Patrick. But what about Mom?" Thomas stared at the ceiling. "She's just as guilty. We have the phone records. We also have your discovery of that suspicious folder, the emails referencing a hospital job. Patrick basically admitted her involvement. The police can charge her too." Jason swallowed hard. "We have to do it, right?" Thomas's eyes stung. He nodded. "Yes, it breaks my heart, but we can't ignore her role in this. She wanted me gone." He paused, the memory of his wife's face flashing in his mind. "I'd rather see her in court than planning another accident." Later that night, he called Detective Bernal. The detective answered on the first ring. "Thomas, I was about to call you. We found references on Patrick's phone about your wife. He calls her M. We suspect she was intimately involved. We'll need your help locating her." Thomas's voice sounded hollow to his own ears. "She should be at our family home. If not, I'll find her." Bernal thanked him and said, "We'll pick her up. Can you stay available tomorrow if we need an ID?" Thomas agreed, ending the call with a sense of finality. He exhaled, feeling a sharp pang in his chest, not from the ribs, but from the heartbreak of what was to come. That night, father and son tried to rest, but neither found real sleep. The next day, mid-morning, Detective Bernal and a colleague, Detective Yu, arrived at the Miller home in an unmarked police car. Thomas and Jason accompanied them, hearts pounding as they pulled up the quiet suburban street. The house looked idyllic from the outside, flowers blooming along the driveway, trimmed hedges, a calm sense of normalcy. No one would guess the occupant was suspected of conspiring to kill her own husband. Bernal and Yu approached the front door while Thomas and Jason hung back near the walkway. Thomas's stomach churned as Bernal rang the bell twice before Melanie appeared. She wore a casual blouse and jeans, hair pulled up, face devoid of makeup. Seeing the detectives, she faltered. Then her eyes slid past them, spotting Thomas and Jason standing behind. A flicker of fear crossed her features. "Yes?" she asked, voice trembling. Bernal displayed his badge. "Melanie Miller, we have questions about an ongoing investigation. May we come in?" She attempted composure. "What is this about? I don't know." Bernal's tone was polite but firm. "Let's speak inside." Stepping back, Melanie glanced once more at Thomas, a silent plea in her eyes. Inside, the living room was tidy and bright, the same space where many family memories had been formed. Thomas fought an urge to look at the framed photos on the mantel. Him, Melanie, and Jason, smiling on a beach vacation years ago. Detective Yu began. "Mrs. Miller, we have substantial evidence that you participated in a conspiracy to sabotage your husband's vehicle, among other charges. Patrick Hayes has been arrested, and we have records of your communications. We're placing you under arrest." Melanie's face blanched. "No," she breathed, glancing at Thomas. "Thomas, I can explain. I never wanted you hurt. Not really." Thomas's voice cracked. "You were complicit, Melanie. You and Patrick tried to kill me." Tears streamed down her cheeks. She sank onto the couch as Bernal read her the Miranda rights. "Please," she said brokenly. "It was Patrick's idea. He threatened me. I didn't know how to stop it." You produced the damning evidence. Printed emails with her name, phone logs, references to accident arrangement. Melanie sobbed, covering her face, but the detectives weren't swayed. When they guided her out in handcuffs, neighbors peered from behind curtains in shock. Jason stood, arms crossed tightly, eyes filled with hurt rather than anger. As the squad car pulled away, Thomas stared, tears burning at the corners of his eyes. This was the woman he had married, the mother of his child, now revealed as an enemy. The arrests of Patrick Hayes and Melanie Miller sent shockwaves through the local business community. News outlets clamored for statements. Rumors flew that a high-profile CEO had orchestrated a lethal plot, aided by his lover, to seize control of a thriving consulting firm. Thomas found himself inundated with calls from clients, employees, and journalists. He released a terse statement confirming that Patrick Hayes and Melanie Miller have been apprehended under suspicion of attempting to sabotage the leadership of Miller Analytics. No further details were given, citing an ongoing investigation. Emotionally, Thomas felt raw. He stayed in the short-term apartment, visiting the office only sporadically to keep the business running. He faced repeated flashbacks of the crash, the hospital infiltration, and the moment Melanie had been led away in cuffs. Jason, meanwhile, stepped up in a way Thomas had not fully expected. The young man had always been bright, but now he showed resilience and a surprising knack for crisis management. With Thomas's physical injuries still healing and his emotional state frayed, Jason became an unofficial coordinator at Miller Analytics, ensuring day-to-day tasks proceeded smoothly. Employees admired his composure and loyalty, especially under such chaotic circumstances. One evening, after a long day of damage control, Jason joined Thomas in the small apartment. Thomas sat on the couch, remote in hand, flipping aimlessly through channels without watching. Jason dropped onto the adjacent armchair. "How you holding up, Dad?" he asked quietly. Thomas shrugged. "Better physically, but everything else is a mess. I can't wrap my head around how your mother got to that point." Jason gazed at the floor. "I don't know. Maybe she felt overshadowed, or Patrick promised her a life she thought she deserved." He let out a pained sigh. "It doesn't excuse it." They shared a long silence. Eventually, Jason straightened, an idea forming in his eyes. "Dad, the board is uneasy. Some clients have threatened to pull out, worried about the scandal. We need a stable figure at the helm, someone to reassure them. That might be me." Thomas studied him. "You're 19. "I know, but I've been around the company enough. I'm majoring in business and tech. We can position me as interim CEO, with you as an advisor until you're fully ready. It might calm everyone down, seeing that the Miller family still stands strong." Thomas smiled faintly. "You think you can handle it?" Jason, though clearly nervous, nodded. "With your guidance, yes. I believe in the company and its people." Thomas felt an immense surge of pride. "Then let's do it. I'll talk to the board members I trust. We'll push for an interim structure." Jason exhaled, relief and determination mingling. They had lost so much, but father and son were forging a path forward. The next board meeting of Miller Analytics took place in a glass-walled conference room on the 20th floor of their building. The midday sun illuminated the polished table and the anxious faces of the board members. Thomas, wearing a brace around his ribs, introduced Jason formally as the proposed interim CEO. Some members gasped. Jason was quite young, fresh out of his first year of college. But Thomas spoke with conviction, addressing each concern. "I'll remain as an advisor, ensuring no major decisions occur without oversight. However, I'm not fit to run the day-to-day right now. Jason's been an integral part of stabilizing the firm since the scandal broke." Jason pitched in, describing strategies for restoring client confidence, emphasizing transparency, and reassuring them that the sabotage scandal was contained to outside forces, namely Patrick and Melanie. A few skeptical members challenged him, but he calmly cited his knowledge of the firm's operations and the spirit of innovation he wanted to bring. After an hour, the board voted. With Thomas's urging and the sense that no better alternative had emerged, Jason was approved as interim CEO. Walking out of that conference room, father and son exchanged a look, exhausted yet hopeful. "We did it, Dad," Jason said quietly, a tremor of excitement in his voice. Thomas mustered a nod. The act of relinquishing direct control was bittersweet. He loved the company he'd built, Yet he also felt relief in delegating leadership while he recovered. From that day on, Jason took over day-to-day operations, surprising many by how quickly he adopted a professional demeanor. Senior employees guided him, while Thomas provided counsel from the sidelines. Slowly, new clients showed interest, impressed by the strong father-son dynamic and the story of resilience in the face of betrayal. Meanwhile, the legal gears turned swiftly. Patrick Hayes, once the revered CEO of Global Strategy, languished in jail, awaiting trial on charges of conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and more. Investigators found more incriminating evidence on his personal devices, lists of business rivals, notes on intimidation tactics. His downfall became a grim, cautionary tale in the corporate scene. Melanie Miller's situation was equally dire. Held in a county detention center, she faced a barrage of charges matching Patrick's: conspiracy, attempted murder, accessory to sabotage. Both she and Patrick maintained some measure of innocence, blaming each other. Melanie's lawyer claimed she had been coerced, an argument that might reduce her sentence but not eradicate her guilt. Thomas avoided direct contact with Melanie. The emotional toll was too high. Once, he might have wanted closure or an explanation, but now he could barely stomach the thought. Jason, too, struggled with the knowledge that his own mother had put his father's life at risk. Soon, the press shifted their focus to new scandals, leaving Thomas with the aftermath, a swirl of legal depositions, statements, and the fracturing of his family. He continued therapy for his injuries, both physical and psychological, determined to heal fully. One late afternoon, as he rested in the apartment, he received a call from an unknown number. Upon answering, a female voice spoke. "Thomas, it's me, Melanie." His heart lurched. "How are you even calling?" he asked stiffly. She sniffled. "I had one phone call I could make. I just want to tell you I'm sorry. I never should have." He swallowed, pain flaring in his throat. "Stop. I can't hear this right now. You tried to kill me, Melanie. Our marriage is over. The rest is up to the courts." She sobbed softly, voice cracking. "Thomas, please." He ended the call, tears burning his own eyes. Guilt, rage, and sorrow clashed inside him. He hadn't just lost a wife. He'd lost the life he'd thought was real. To cope, Thomas threw himself into helping Jason succeed as interim CEO. Each morning, father and son would discuss the firm's top priorities over coffee in the small kitchen of the short-term apartment. Thomas's chest still ached, but he found a new sense of purpose in guiding Jason. Under Jason's leadership, Miller Analytics adopted fresh initiatives, using advanced data visualization tools for clients, expanding into remote consulting, and forging alliances with smaller niche companies. The scandal ironically generated a wave of publicity, and many in the business world admired how a young CEO stepped up under extraordinary circumstances. Clients initially leery about the fiasco came to realize that the threats came from external forces, not from the company's own ethos. Over time, these clients recommitted, inspired by the firm's transparent approach to crisis management. They appreciated that the original founder, Thomas, was still present in an advisory role, ensuring continuity. Yet behind the scenes, personal healing was a longer road. Thomas woke some nights drenched in sweat, haunted by nightmares of a masked intruder leaning over his hospital bed. At other times, he recalled how Melanie's eyes had sparkled on their wedding day, how they had once laughed together about silly, mundane troubles. The memory of her involvement in sabotage formed a constant ache. Jason, too, grappled with the emotional weight. Sometimes, he'd lock himself in the office restroom, tears flowing as he tried to reconcile the mother he had loved with the criminal in custody. But each time he emerged, he squared his shoulders and continued leading. Thomas insisted on a session with the company employees to address the crisis openly. Standing beside Jason, he spoke in a calm yet firm tone. What happened here was the result of greed and betrayal from outside, but that doesn't define us. Miller Analytics is about integrity. My son and I stand committed to that principle. The employees clapped, some tearful, others hopeful. Morale, battered by the scandal, began to mend. A few weeks later, Thomas faced the official sentencing hearings for both Melanie and Patrick. He arrived at the courthouse with Jason. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but father and son moved swiftly inside. The tension was thick as they sat in the gallery, awaiting the judge. Patrick's case came first. Evidence was overwhelming. The recorded confession, phone logs, suspicious financial transactions tied to sabotage attempts. His lawyers spun tales of entrapment and coercion from an unnamed third party, but the judge was unmoved. Patrick Hayes was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and fraud. He would spend decades in prison. Then came Melanie's turn. She pleaded guilty to lesser charges in exchange for testifying against Patrick, but the judge was stern. She was sentenced to a significant prison term, albeit shorter than Patrick's, given her late cooperation. Thomas watched in stony silence as she was led away, head bowed. Though heartbreak crushed him, he also felt relief. No more hidden threats, no more vile conspiracies lurking. She was gone, and so was Patrick. The future, for the first time in months, felt open. Over the next several months, Thomas poured his energy into convalescence and emotional recovery. Physical therapy sessions helped restore mobility in his ribs. Counseling sessions helped mend the psychological scars, though some wounds might never fully heal. Jason, with the backing of the board, continued to flourish in his role. He had a knack for leveraging technology to optimize data consulting services. Word spread that Miller Analytics, under this fresh leadership, was forging new ground. The growth rate ticked upward, ironically spurred by the publicity surrounding the scandal's resolution. Though Thomas had once dreamed of leading his company for decades, he found himself increasingly content to be an advisor. He offered guidance during strategic meetings, occasionally traveling to meet key clients, but he let Jason handle the day-to-day hustle. The father-son bond also deepened through this shared hardship. They recognized a mutual respect for each other's strengths, Thomas's seasoned wisdom and Jason's youthful innovation. In the aftermath of betrayal, their relationship became a pillar of trust. One quiet afternoon, Thomas invited Jason to join him at a nearby coffee shop. They chose a corner table, the hum of soft music in the background. As they sipped cappuccinos, Thomas said, "I've decided to take a real break, maybe travel." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Travel? Where to?" Thomas shrugged. "No plan yet. Maybe a national park. Clear my head. I need to find myself outside the shadow of all this drama." Jason nodded. "I think that's a great idea. The board and I can handle the firm while you're gone. You deserve a rest." Thomas smiled, a weight lifting. "Thank you, son." They lingered, discussing future expansions for the firm, recent victories, and the idea of Jason finishing his degree while still juggling the CEO role, perhaps part-time classes or an online program. Life was far from simple, but for the first time in ages, it felt brimming with possibility rather than fear. Several weeks passed, and the final chapters of the legal battle wound down. Patrick's official sentencing ended with a maximum penalty for his orchestrations. Numerous victims from other corporate sabotage instances also surfaced, painting him as a serial manipulator. Melanie, through her confession and partial cooperation, reduced her sentence slightly, but would still serve a significant term. Thomas quietly filed for divorce, the process going almost uncontested given Melanie's incarceration. The sorrow of it was immense. He'd truly believed they would grow old together. But no marriage could withstand such betrayal. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, Thomas and Jason stood outside the Miller home, which had lain mostly vacant since Melanie's arrest. They'd come to decide whether Thomas would keep it or sell it. Walking through each room, Thomas experienced a cascade of memories, some joyous, some now tinged with bitterness. In the living room, he paused at a photograph. Young Jason, perched on Thomas's shoulders, both of them grinning widely on a family vacation. Melanie stood beside them in the photo, smiling brightly. Thomas felt a punch in his gut. How had it all gone so wrong? Jason cleared his throat, standing behind him. "Dad, do you want to keep the house?" Thomas set the photo down carefully. "I don't think I can. Too many memories. I'd rather start fresh somewhere else." Jason nodded, placing a comforting hand on his father's shoulder. "Okay, we'll list it then." They spent the next few hours boxing up old belongings, some to keep, some to donate. When they eventually closed the front door, Thomas felt a strange mixture of relief and finality. Over the following weeks, the house went on the market, and Thomas located a new, smaller place, one that overlooked a park and fit his simpler needs. He felt an odd sense of liberation, as if stepping out from under a heavy burden. With Patrick Hayes and Melanie Miller behind bars, Miller Analytics thrived under Jason's watchful leadership. Though still young, he embraced mentorship from experienced executives, cultivating a forward-thinking culture. Colleagues praised his even-tempered approach, a blend of idealism and practicality. Thomas gradually found a measure of peace. He took a 2-week trip into the mountains, staying at a rustic cabin where he hiked during the day and reflected at night. The fresh air and expansive views helped him heal the invisible wounds. He returned with a new resolve to live life on different terms, less about constant vigilance, more about savoring each moment. That didn't mean burying the trauma, but rather acknowledging it as part of his story, a testament to what he'd survived. One crisp autumn evening, father and son met up at a local restaurant. They chose a table by the window, the leaves outside turning shades of gold and red. Over plates of salmon and roasted vegetables, Jason filled Thomas in on the company's latest expansions. "We're finalizing a deal with an international tech firm," Jason said with excitement. "It's going to open up markets across Europe. We've never had that kind of reach before." Thomas grinned. "That's fantastic. You're doing an incredible job." Jason's expression softened. "I'm building on what you created. You know, employees still talk about your leadership style, how you used to personally mentor them." Thomas sighed, swirling his drink. "I miss it sometimes, but I'm proud of you. You've taken it further than I ever imagined." They clinked glasses, father and son united in the aftermath of a nightmare that had nearly shattered them. Memories of the betrayal still lingered in the shadows, but overshadowed now by hope, perseverance, and a renewed sense of unity. After dinner, as they walked out into the crisp night air, Thomas paused on the sidewalk. The city lights glinted above them, reminiscent of the night he had confronted Patrick in the penthouse. So much had changed since then. He had confronted unimaginable betrayal, nearly lost his life, and watched his marriage crumble under the weight of greed. Yet, here he stood, battered but not broken. Jason noticed his father's contemplative silence. "Dad?" Thomas turned with a faint smile. "I'm just glad we got through it," he said quietly. "We have a future, you and I. Miller Analytics will keep thriving and we'll keep living our lives." Jason nodded, returning the smile. "We sure will." They started walking again, shoulders squared against the night chill. Around them, cars whooshed past, neon signs blinked, and city dwellers bustled by, each with their own story. Thomas felt a warmth in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Gratitude for survival, for justice, and for the unbreakable bond between father and son. Though the scars would remain, both physical and emotional, Thomas had no doubt that they had stepped onto a new path, a path free from deceit, built on trust and resilience. In that moment, he realized that yes, tragedies can strike and illusions can crumble, but with truth, determination, and the support of those who truly care, one can rise from the wreckage stronger than ever.